the number one tip for non-string players when you're working with the or strings in your orchestra is to know that you're not alone, is that you have plenty of help and that you're not the first one to feel like this and you won't be the last one to feel like this. Talk to your section leaders, talk to your principal players, have them help out with bowings, have them demonstrate, what you want, good sounds, all that.
Hey there, welcome to the Conductor's podcast. I'm your host, Chawen Ting, a conductor with over 20 years of experience working with professional symphony orchestras, opera houses, new music groups, and vocalists. I'm also founder of Girls Who Conduct and have mentored hundreds of conductors from across the globe. I created the Conductor's podcast to share all the behind-the-scenes secrets with you while I interview conductors, musicians, and business gurus from around the world. This is a space created for conductors, conducting students, musicians, and non-musicians who are curious and interested in learning more about the profession, craft, industry, and business. Shy away from the real talk? No way. Money, hardship, growth, and the roller coaster of a conducting career are all topics we discuss here. I will give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to help you take action on your big dream, move through the fear that's holding you back, and have a real impact. Now, pull up a seat, make sure you're cozy, and get ready to be challenged and encouraged while you learn. Hey there! Happy Thursday if you're listening when this episode is released. Or happy ending day if you're just joining us later any time of the year. Today, my guest, Dr. Kira Omelchenko, will be sharing with us her tips on working with strings. When you work with an orchestral ensemble, no matter a chamber orchestra, a full symphonic orchestra, or even just a few musicians at your church's Christmas service, for example, you are very likely working with string players, and perhaps quite some of them. After all, string makes up the largest body in an orchestra, and because of the nature of having multiple players per part, knowing how to work with strings will really help your rehearsal process and to achieve better performances. Of course, we all have different backgrounds and training, and it could be intimidating to work with strings for the first time or the first few times when you are less experienced. There is also this immediate problem of having to match the bowings across the string sections that needed to be addressed. Dr. Kira Omelchenko is currently the conductor of the Wilfrid Laurier University Symphony Orchestra in Ontario, Canada. Previously, she served as string director for the International Opera Performing Experience Festival in Mercatello sul Mateuro in Italy, and artistic in residence and guest conductor with the University of Aveiro Orchestra in Portugal. Her upcoming engagements include conducting at the Vienna Opera Academy and Orlando Old County Festival Orchestra. Welcome to the show, Kira, and I'm so thrilled to welcome you to the Conductor's Podcast. And I can't wait for you to share your story and experience with my audience.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with Chawen. I look forward to our conversation today.
So before we get started, will you please give everybody just a short intro about your background and how you get to where you are now?
Sure. So my name's Kira Omelchenko, and I am a conductor, or orchestral conductor primarily, and a little bit about my background. I'm currently living and teaching in Canada at Wilfrid Laurier University, which is located in Waterloo, Ontario. And so currently I reside here in Canada, teach here, conduct the orchestra here, and this is my third year, starting my third year. And before moving to Canada, I was in the States. So I grew up in the States. I'm from the Midwest originally. So go Midwest people out there. And after doing my studies, undergraduate and doctoral studies, I moved to Florida. Actually, I had my first teaching job out of grad school in Florida, and I was there for 7 years. So kind of experiencing different areas of the states, and now in Canada. But it's just a joy to be making music and conducting wherever I am.
So I actually get connected with Kira through a common friend, Lucy Lois. And Lucy and I went to school together at CCM when I was doing my doctorate in conducting. No, I did my master's there when she did her violin performance. I think she had a minor in conducting. So I know that you two developed some programs for strings. And I saw that you have served as the string director for the International Opera Performing Experience Festival in Italy. So could you talk to us about the experience and what would a string director do?
Sure, and that's a good question, and thank you for sharing that. Because a shout out to Lucy, I guess, if Lucy's listening, because it's great to meet, I think, new people, right? To make new connections through our current ones, because the world is so small, and it's really nice to meet musicians from all over the world. So thank you for this opportunity to be connecting. And Lucy and I met, just a side story. Lucy and I met at the University of Iowa, where I was doing my DMA in orchestral conducting, and Lucy was studying violin. And to this day, we're collaborators, and we find ways to connect, and we're still dear friends. So a little bit about what a director does, especially with international program. So a couple summers ago, I was invited through my opera colleague, Mark Thompson, and Mark runs an opera program in Italy called the International Opera Performance Experience, or otherwise known as IOPE. It's a festival in Marcatello sul Mataro in Italy, about middle of Italy, and it's located in a beautiful kind of medieval village. And so I was invited to serve as a string director to kind of think about the vision of the program, but also a lot of organization. And I think that's really an important skill to learn and to gain, and skills that I'm seeing that are more, I think, needed from conductors is administrative. Are you good with organization, with communication? Also emails, like technology, communication. I feel like that's a really important skill, and a lot of skills that I learned by directing that program. So being a director of a program such as that, it's a lot of just overseeing and communication with the students. So communicating with them, I would have meetings with the students, the string students, before we even left, to kind of talk about pre-departure safety, just a lot of things that is actually non-music related, like how to get your passport and what you need to pack with you, but things that are still important for safe travel, especially abroad. Another aspect of my duties as a string director was to think about the vision of the programs, so the goals. And this program was a 2-week program that I helped out with. And so think about the outcomes of the program. What is doable? What can we do in a week? In 2 weeks and all that. And what would I like the students to experience, so thinking about the student perspective, their experience, the outcomes, what types of music can we perform, who are we performing to, and then also organizing the schedule. So thinking about the rehearsal schedule, and thinking about another thing to consider when we're abroad is thinking about the quiet times, because in Italy they had where we're studying, they had mandatory quiet times, in the afternoon, so that the businesses usually close, right? People go home and with their families, take a break, all that. So we had to be really, I think, mindful of the culture and what the traditions are in that city, and not just be, just doing whatever we want, because we are a guest at that program, and it's just emphasizing that to the students. So thinking about scheduling, rehearsing, but also when the schedule breaks throughout the day, so that the students can also go out into the village. They can go meet with locals. They can experience shopping at the nearby, a supermarket, and so that the students gain an immersive experience. Yeah, it's a musical experience, but it's also a cultural experience for the students. So a lot of it is just organizing, communication, and then also being I think just being flexible with the space, because when you're going to a town or a city that you've never been to, we recommended that students bring their own wire stands just to be safe. So a tip out there, if you're ever traveling on your own and you need, a pop-up place to practice, to bring your own wire stand, to have music also available electronic form, just in case if you lose paper copies, or if your battery runs out in the middle of a rehearsal on your iPad, or whatever you're using, to also have a paper backup copy. So we made sure to have I think, always a second plan. So thinking about flexibility with space, realizing that the space sometimes are going to be a little bit smaller. We're sharing rooms, and we're sharing buildings with the community, and it's not just for us, but also just keeping everyone, I think, in the loop, keeping everyone up to date, so the students know what to expect, but also so they feel safe. So a lot of times my communications were on group chat. We're doing, making sure they get the daily schedule, making sure that we are meeting. We meet often for dinner, after everything, and we meet and chat and just about the day, and also just about what they've learned, and how their day's going, and just kind of a nice way to just connect with familiar people at the end of every day. So yes, conducting, yes, that was part of it, conducting the group, but also I gave individual lessons, so string lessons on their various instruments. We did chamber groups, duets, and I also provided individual mentorship sessions. So a lot of times those were my favorite, because we just go sit at a coffee shop in the afternoon, and nearby in the beautiful city, and we just talk about either conducting. There are a couple students who are really interested in conducting, or I call them professional development chats. We just talk about, how do you prepare for an interview? How do you prepare for an audition, or what kind of materials would you want in your portfolio and your application package? So those, I enjoyed those chats, outside of kind of the rehearsal room, where you could just, they could just ask questions about life, and ask questions about, how do I put together a CV? What needs to be in the CV? So, and again, just also giving them the time to experience the culture, experience the food, right? That's important. And also experience just one another and company, and also meeting the locals. So when we had our final performances, also kind of scheduling times where they could do, let's say, like a mock run through or a mock performance. We had it like out in the middle of the village, in the street, in the main center, so that they had, I think, that experience of playing for strangers, people walking by, strangers walking by, who hear the music and think it's a concert they're attending. But just how, just gaining those experiences of playing in front of crowds and building up confidence. So those are just a few elements of being a director, because it is such a, I guess, a title that can mean so many things, but it's often, people are looking up to you, or people are looking at you as a leader, as a one who's organizing, the one to kind of make sure everyone is on the same page, and knows what's expected and feels safe.
Yeah, I think what you were talking about is so important, especially now. It's a different era for conductors, that you are very often engaged to do a conducting performance, but people expect you to know a lot more, or to be able to manage a lot more than just rehearsing. For example, if you can help the librarian find where the parts are, can you provide bowings if they are stuck? Also, like you said about space and schedule, respecting different cultural, and how do you management your rehearsal when they are mandatory quiet time, for example, or when the stage is not big enough for what you had planned, you have to use different stands, you have to cut a few percussion instruments, all that kind of things. And experience of learning, and the more you know about how to run an organization, and how to, as you said, help everybody to become their best and still feel safe and being like respected and trusted in the program, it's super important. So I didn't get to ask that, are you a violinist, or like
Yes,
violin?
yes. My primary instrument's violin, and also voice. Growing up, those were my main
Wow.
instruments.
So you now still do you also teach string lessons or string method class outside of conducting, or like what are the duties with your teaching position?
Sure. So at Laurier, so first of all, I'm a violinist and vocalist, and I feel like it's very important to keep up those instruments, in some shape or form. And so I'll be constantly singing, in rehearsals. But with violin, I do teach on the side. Right now, with the benefits of Zoom and with online presence and everything, I'm able to teach students long distance, students I've had before on Zoom. So at Laurier, my role is the conductor of the symphony orchestra, but also the director. I feel like director and conductor kind of goes hand in hand, because you're the one with kind of the vision, right? The one organizing with the vision, organizing programs and concerts, all that, but also seeing the big goals of the orchestra. So that's my primary role at Laurier here, and I also teach. Classes such as right now I'm teaching orchestral literature, so a history class, and I also teach conducting classes.
So I'm glad that you brought the topic about COVID, because when everything shut down, I know a lot of the colleagues went into teaching virtual orchestra for a semester or a whole year. And I also heard a lot of programs were cut down to strings only because there used to be a lot of concerns about wind players blowing air into their instrument. And I heard from some colleagues who were not as familiar with string ensembles, having to come up with some repertoire or have to teach strings that itself is hard enough also via Zoom. So can you maybe share some tips or maybe even some challenges that you were seeing, particularly for this pandemic year or even beyond, kind of in general when you're working with strings? What are some good things to do or the don't?
Yeah, so I think some tips for how to work with strings, right? Like a string ensemble or even strings in your orchestra, perhaps from a perspective from someone who is maybe not as comfortable with strings. So a non-string player, I would call them like a non-string player, right? Tips for non-string players. And I think this kind of goes back with my idea, or back tying this thought to my experience in Italy, like trying to plan and manage for who knows, you're thinking about the future, like, I don't know what to expect. So in a way, you try to expect and prepare for everything. But I think the one lesson I've learned from Italy, and the same tip I would suggest for non-string players, is that there are plenty of people who want to help you, and I think that's the beauty about being a musician, is that you're surrounded by colleagues. I mean, it might not be obvious, I'm thinking, okay, I'm the only symphony orchestra person in my school, but you have musician colleagues in the community, and I know that just by asking questions, like preparing for Italy, and like what are the rooms like, and what is this like, just asking questions to my peers and to staff support and everything, like just knowing that you're not alone, I think is really really just important to remember. And I don't know about you, Chawin, but during the pandemic last year, because we were online the whole year for ensembles, for classes last year, at times I did feel alone, a lot more alone than I was used to, because conducting, and let's face it, orchestra and ensembles, it's a social event. I mean, we love being there. I love being there because of the people, and the musicians, and it's a social event. We feed off of each other's energy. And then there are times last year, yes, even though we had ensembles online, like we did everything on Zoom and Jamulus and everything, it was still, I just still felt alone at times, because you're staring at one screen and you're trying to connect, over the internet, or the lack of internet, and over Ethernet and everything. And so I found that how I was conducting changed, because I wasn't in a large room full of people. I was instead conducting to this small screen, which it affects your conducting, right? So to me, I felt like I was conducting for a different purpose. But even though everything was online, I still felt that who I was as a teacher didn't change. I think that's kind of the light out of the pandemic, is that yes, it challenged me as a teacher. It made me think about my role, my purpose. It made me think about how can I engage my students online? How can I be there? How can I be a better teacher, right? If anything, I think it's made me a stronger teacher, and made me hopefully more creative in the long run. So yes, even though ideally no one wanted to experienced the pandemic, I think there are lots of things that we learned from the pandemic, and some of the aspects from what I've used teaching online last year or teaching remote, I've kept this year. For example, bringing in guests virtually, right? And using technology, like I'm using technology more now in orchestra than I had before. So I think just number one tip, well, I'll go on, I promise. I think the number one tip for non-string players when you're working with a group of strings or strings in your orchestra is to know that you're not alone, is that you have plenty of help, and that you're not the first one to feel like this, and you won't be the last one to feel like this. I think it's just, it's just how we are, I think, as conductors, as we put so much pressure on ourselves to be perfect or to be like an expert at everything. And I think just knowing that as a conductor, as a leader of an ensemble, right, our role that is to bring the sounds together, is that we are experts on the collective sound, and that yes, yes, we want to be experts on everything, but it's just almost impossible. You think about, you can't be an expert on everything. Who has that much time? But knowing that there are people that you can go to, and that as a conductor, as a director, that we are there because people trust us to be good musicians. We like trust yourselves. I think trust yourself to be a good musician. You have good ears, and and to trust your players as well. So if you have some advanced players in your group, these would be some of the suggestions I would share. Is that yeah, like talk to your section leaders, talk to your principal players. Have them help out with bowings, have them demonstrate what you want, good sounds, all that. So yeah, go to your section players. You can also talk to your fellow string colleagues. So either directly, if you're working in a academic university, like ourselves, you can talk to your string colleagues. You can, or if not, you can talk to strings in the community, or some string players in the area, and have them be, have them help out with sectionals. I think one thing I learned as a younger conductor was just like the value of having sectionals. Even if they weren't in didn't occur during the scheduled rehearsal, having the sectionals outside of rehearsal. Like we would have, in the past, I would have like a string sectional once a week, where I just work with the strings. And that way, in a way, it benefited the strings, working on bowings and kind of things that the strings really needed time to do, so it didn't take away from the full tutti rehearsal, but also in a way it kept my ears up. It kept me in shape orally to be able to be like, oh, okay, we need to work on this sound, this round. Because for me, the string sound is so important when it comes to a symphony orchestra. I just love the strings. They're near and dear to my heart, but it's just, something about the string sound. That's what makes a symphony orchestra, is that there has to be strings involved. It's a completely different ensemble if there's not. So I think just the importance of string sound, but knowing that to trust yourself as a musician. And of course, we can always all grow and learn techniques on the different instruments. You can take, workshops. There's lots of wonderful master classes. The list goes on and on, right? And there's also lots of string a lot of string references out there. Like you can go to America ASTA, right? American String Teachers Association. You can go to local workshops that are being held in your area, regional ones. And with technology, a lot of them are going to be offered online. So just going and participating and observing, that can be helpful. Another tip would be to observe a lesson, like take a lesson yourself. Yes, like that would be number one. If you haven't taken a lesson on a violin or viola, cello, bass, is to get your hands on an instrument and take a lesson with someone who plays that instrument, so that at least you get that experience of feeling what it feels like, like feeling like how awkward it is to bow, or how awkward it is to do this or this position, but at least just experiencing the basics, and of course, probably all these tips have been shared before, because this is like an ideal situation, like you have endless time, you have endless financial aid, all this stuff, and we realize that not everyone has that at their readily so. But I think just knowing that, if you ask a colleague, hey, can I sit on a lesson that you're teaching, just to kind of hear and see how you teach, or just see what goes into technique. And again, there are lots and lots of resources out there. But to continue on with my tips, if you don't mind, is
Of course, we love tips.
yes, I think some suggestions for like when you're rehearsing, or if you don't feel comfortable like saying specific string terms, because we realize, like I realize there is a lot of terms, like a lot of string terms that are sometimes when I talk about terms in orchestra, I see the winds and the brass percussion faces just like glaze over, like what is this jete and ricochet and pizzicato, all these terms. But knowing but I think even if you're not comfortable with the terms or with the bowings and everything, you can always sing. I think that's fundamental. Is as a conductor, as a human being, we're all born with a voice, and who remembers taking skills class or musicianship class like in college, like we all did, so using those skills to our benefit. So I don't think I can stress the importance of modeling, like the sound you want. Maybe we don't know the exact words or down bow, up bow, but if you know the sound you want, like create that sound, model it for them. And just as that's the educational tip too, is seeing the phrase, seeing what you would like. And a lot of times if you sing it the way you want, or even bringing your own instrument that you play with you. So even if you're, let's say, a saxophonist and you're working with strings, it's okay to model what you want on the saxophone, because the idea of how breathing, right? The idea of breathing with the wind and brass instrument, that's going to convey to the bow, the use of the bow, which is often for strings, our air. It's our air. We run out of bow, we run out of sound, right? We run out of air. And so but I think it's just universal that everyone can at least sing their part, and asking the strings to sing back too. That's fine to do, because oftentimes if you sing it, you'll know what you want, or it'll become, I think, more apparent what you want phrase wise. So don't be afraid to use your voice. Like a lot of times in my rehearsals, I make like nonsense sounds, nonsense syllables, words that don't even exist, like like the articulation is like waka 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 waka. I'm not a walkie, I'm not like a crazy animal. But I think just sometimes sounds, for me, sounds convey more than just words, because if I say strings, let's get more of a ka sound. What does that mean for articulation? And oftentimes if you model for the strings what you want, or at least for your section leaders, or you talk to your concert master, like, okay, this moment needs to have this kind of sound, express the sound. And then a lot of times you trust your section leaders, your advanced players, to know how to get that sound in their bowing and the articulation. And if it's not right, or if it's close, be like, you can tell them, be honest, be like, okay, that's close, how can we get it more like this, how can we get it more legato or more shorter, so just knowing that the universal language, yes, it is music, but I think also sounds, universal language is sounds, and what kind of sound do you want, either if it's dolce or marcato or agitato. So not being afraid to sing for them or sing at them. A lot of times I do that. I don't even realize it. And I think that kind of goes on with, sorry, side note, like almost like a rehearsal technique, because
Of course.
I do realize that I think earlier on in my conducting days, I would just like, first of all, I was so nervous I didn't talk at all. And then later in my career, I was explaining too much, right? Like
Mm.
feeling that I had to like over explain or over clarify. And then, but that was the young conductor through my training. It's like, oh, okay, well then let's see how much I can do without saying anything. And then nowadays, I think I've finally am approaching a balance. Of course, I'm still evolving as a conductor, as a human being. I hope to for the rest of my life. But I think just, but now find that balance of, oh, well, sometimes I don't have to stop and explain, things or rehearsing. Sometimes I'll just stop and be like, brass, more like this, and I'll make the sound, I'll do that, and boom, and they change it, So sometimes I'm finding, I think, more efficient ways to rehearse and more efficient ways to communicate from quality of sound to quality of sound, if that makes sense. So I think other tips that I've shared. Yeah, take lessons if you can. I talk to so many educators around the world about this, and everyone wants to take lessons, everyone wants
Yeah.
workshops, they want that, but then summer
Yeah.
comes and it's like, we're all so busy, right? We're either busy all summer or we need that summertime or we need that off time
Yeah.
to recuperate, which I would also stress, like, is so important for a musician, for a conductor, is to recuperate, to recharge your battery. But finding time, like when is the best time to take a lesson here or there? Maybe allowing your summers or your off time to actually be off time, where you don't do any professional development. Like take that pressure off you, off you, and just enjoy your summer. Like enjoy your vacation, y'all. But then finding time throughout the year, perhaps, when you're how should I call it, like intellectually stimulated already, so you're just like, hey, I'm on a roll this week. Hey, I can squeeze in a 30-minute just to go sit in a lesson. I'm going to be in the building anyway. I'm going to be in the work environment where I'm going to be. So I'm just going to pop in and ask my colleagues to sit on a 20-minute lesson, like do it when you're in the mood and when you're ready to go, instead of, I don't know, this is just for me, like when I schedule something a month later, I think, oh yes, it's going to be great. And then the month comes and I realize how busy I am. I'm like, why did I do that? Or sometimes you look at a week in your calendar, you're like, oh, I have nothing here. I can do it there. But who knows, when that week comes, maybe you need that week actually off,
Yeah.
So just, I think just, when it hits you, just go and take a lesson, go sit in, go, instead of Netflixing one evening, watch some master classes on YouTube or something, from some of the greats. And maybe you can, I don't know, maybe that's more like a self-discipline, self-reward is, okay, before I watch the next season of Game of Thrones or whatever, before I start this show, every time I get on Netflix, I'm going to watch just a 15-minute short masterclass series, just kind of
Mhm.
scheduling in, so that it's also keeping that up. Yeah. So other tips, yeah, asking your colleagues come in, sit in to help out with sectionals. They can lead sectionals. I'm very grateful for my string colleagues here. Just to they're just so great with the students. But not only are my string colleagues like helping with sectionals and helping with bowings on that, all that, but they're demonstrating and teaching the students what good leadership is, like how to run a sectional. What do you listen to when you're leading a sectional? So then by students experiencing that and seeing, their instructors doing that, they take some of those skills and learn about leadership skills as well. So yeah, so sitting in, observing sectionals, seeing what's being focused on sectionals. I think the big question about bowing, I don't know about you, Chow Wen, but I've seen a little kind of the idea of bowing scare conductors, and the idea of bowing. Yes, bowings are important, and I think it almost depends on the level of ensemble you're working with. Like meaning like can they do their own bowings? You ask yourself that question first. Can they do their own bowings? And if the question's yes, like they know what a down bow looks like, an up bow, and all that, then let them do their own bowings. Like let them experience trial and error. To see, not instead of just giving them the bowing, like this is what I want, this is my idea, because it could change. Like letting your section leaders be in charge of bowings, and if they have questions, to run them by you. I try to have an open communication with my students and be like, if you have questions, let me know about bowings, preferably outside of class, just so it doesn't take up rehearsal time, where it's all about bowings, because that could take forever. But just allowing like section leaders for the strings to experience bowings, to experience what is that critical thinking, right? Like decision making process, and realizing that, okay, yes, this is the way that I'm envisioning the bowings, but then having that conversation with their fellow principal players might open up another idea or concept, or make them question, oh, well, perhaps this bowing's better. It's so interesting because a lot of, in my experience, people want the bowings first. It's so important, and we have to have the bowings. And I just want to be like, well, you could play this without bowings. You just do what comes naturally, right? Like follow your instincts, follow your gut, follow the music, right? That's the most important. So I would, so if the question is no, they can't do their own bowings because they don't understand bowings, then yes, I would think like as a conductor and director, it is your responsibility to help them learn about bowings, not do it for them, right? That's another side, but not do the bowings for them, but help them You can have, in warm-ups or something, you've been talking about bowings, like, hey, let's do a scale starting down bow. Okay, now let's try it up bow. What are the differences? What are the challenges? How does it change the sound? How does it change the ensemble, right? Collective sound, collective entrances, all that. So letting them explore bowings and not being afraid to try, I think, something a new way or a different way, even in warm-ups. And then, but I guess for me personally, like bowings, for me, bowings need to be flexible, because it depends on, yes, the level of the group, but also depends on the space. I'm not going to lie. Bowings in one space might work, to do something all down, up as it comes might work in one space. But then when you get to another hall, perhaps you have to change the bowing, right?
Yeah.
Just kind of thinking about, so I guess long story short, for me, it's all about the sound, and the quality of sound should never be sacrificed for everyone trying to look like they're exactly together with the bowing, because
Yeah.
there are times where you want the sound to be sustained. You want this, or if the strings have 4 bars of whole notes, they can't all be like down, up, or anything. Like perhaps you want it to be more free bow, where it changes the sound, where you hear the sound kind of webbing in and out there. So I would say, be flexible with bowing if you're comfortable with that. But I would recommend, like, do what's best for you as a conductor, like what you're most comfortable with. Because I'm sure in my experience, and I realize that my experience might be different than others. So like, do what you're comfortable with. If you're one of those conductors, like, yes, I want to have my bowings exactly my parts and everything, I'd be like, good on you. Yeah, that's excellent. But then just be flexible in case if the ensemble you're working with, or if you're a guest conductor, the ensemble you're working with has different parts or different bowings. So it's always great to think about the bowings you want. Ideally, I put bowings in my score. Yeah, just in my score. I don't put them in parts, but just kind of in my score. And if the bowings change, I write like, maybe, for example, my score bowing, and then I write like the date in the ensemble that I worked with, that I did that experience. So then when I do, let's say, another Tchaikovsky symphony or something with another group, and they're doing a different kind of bowing, or these bowings are from this right tradition or that, then I'll write the changes underneath it and then write what that is, just so I know, like, the level, right? The level of the ensemble
Yeah.
I'm working with. But yeah, I would just say, like, do what's best for you, what works best for you, and what works best for your ensemble. And I hope that's the purpose of these conversations and these tips, is just to take a gleam of what do I like here, what can I use, but also like realizing that some ideas you don't have to use. If you're
Of
comfortable
course.
with what you're doing and it works for you and your group, that's all that matters. Is that there's I think that you're comfortable, right?
Yeah.
With
I
your
know
group.
one thing I do wanted to echo what you said is sometimes I see conductors not as secure or confident in the string knowledge. They will feel that changing bowing is the fix for everything. They will say,
Mhm.
"Oh, the sound is not right here. Why don't you change the bowing? Why don't? Oh, were you up? Can you go down and try?" But actually, like Kira said, really go for the sound. And if you're not sure, you can always ask your players, "Can you play like when a player asks you is this off string or on a string, if you didn't know what the difference were, you can say, can I hear it? Can you play off and can you play on? And then you can say, oh, the other one sounds better with this group. And then as Kira said, I can emphasize it. I can agree with it more. Bowing really changes from group to group. For some group, if you also the number of players matter too. Sometimes you need more sound, they need to change bows more often, or when you have a different type of group and different type of hole that is mushy or it's very dry, then you need more resonant. You want to be able to be flexible and really to serve the music and the sound instead of being so fixed on this bowing has to be perfect and say as it was written in.
Yeah, and those are great, and I appreciate that, because I think any musician, like even me, like, we don't want to be micromanaged, like we don't want people telling us, like, conduct down and then right and then left, like in a way, so exactly. I mean, the strings, the beauty about string playing is that it's very physical. You can see what's going on. And so if you see they're running out of bow, the chances are the sound's going to disappear. The air is going to disappear, right? If you see that they're using so much bow all the time in the lower part of the bow, just listen to the sound. It's going to be probably loud and probably harsh at times, So just, yeah, just, I like that. I like the idea, Chawen, of saying if you're not sure, hey, let's try it this way. Okay, let's play a game. You can make it a game for your group. Let's try it this way. Okay, let's try it that way. And then also getting your players engaged. Like, okay, who votes for number one? Like getting your brass and wind players like actually listening and paying attention to the strings. Like I can't stress it enough. And also cross listening is not just about what you're doing, but how does it affect the whole ensemble, the orchestra and everything.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kira. And I wanted to, just one last question. If my listeners want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
Oh, sure. So find me on Facebook. I think I'm a bit old school, so like find me on Facebook. But also, I have a email as well. I have a website, so you can find me kiraconductor.com, and I have a Gmail. So if you have questions or any follow-up thoughts, I'd love to open up more conversations and meet more conductors around the world. So feel free to email me, and also find me online on Facebook. So thank you so much for the invitation, Chowan.
Thank you. And we'll put the link on the show notes so you won't miss it. Thank you so much, Kira.
Thank you, everyone.
So here you have it, my friend. What I liked the most about today's interview is that what Kira said could actually apply to a lot of other things in life. On how we deal with unfamiliar things or have to expand our knowledge and skill set into unknown territory. Not many people know that I actually conducted a winged band for 5 years when I first started my job at Georgia Tech, because my predecessor was a band director who took over the orchestra when the previous director fell ill and left the position. This was advertised as a joint band/orchestra position, and I almost didn't apply for it because I didn't think that I was qualified with limited wind ensemble experience. However, I won the job and started conducting both orchestra and band, and I did exactly what Kira shared today. Learn as much as you can and find resources for yourself. Reach out to colleagues who are band directors or even composers writing for wings. Watch rehearsals to learn tips of working with students, and focus on musicality and musical element in rehearsal, rather than worrying about teaching students how to make the sounds, which fingerings to use, or how to adjust embouchures, for example. I learned to encourage better breath support and to focus your airflow and to find better places for taking the breath, which was all new to me as a string player. In the end, I told myself that I'm a good musician and I know enough about music to support my ensemble, and that's all that matters. Next week, we'll be talking about something that is a bit dry but less explored amongst conductors and musicians, since I will be sharing with you what is 501c3 and why it matters. It's really important to understand the legal and financial structures of American nonprofit organizations to better know how to run it and to serve your people, right? So, as always, if you're liking the show, I love to encourage you to leave a review on Apple Podcast. Perhaps borrow a friend's iPhone if you don't own a Mac product. Apple Podcast is the only platform taking listeners' reviews into the ranking of the shows, and your support is much appreciated. I will see you next week at the same time, same place. Bye for now.